Okay, welcome everybody. We are on Friday, July 30th episode of Between Two Teachers, and welcome. My name is Consuelo Lara.
I'm Madeline Cronenberg, and as always, we are here on the sacred land of the Chochenyo Karkin Ohlone people. We pause to acknowledge that we've gathered on the ancestral territory of Huchun, part of the unceded land of the Chochenyo and Karkin-speaking Muwekma Ohlone people. We remember their continued connection to this region and give thanks to them for allowing us to live, work, learn, and pray on their traditional homeland. We offer our respect to their elders and all Ohlone people of the past and present. And we look forward to more schools and organizations being renamed in honor of the native peoples. Like one of the things that happened this week is the Cleveland Indians are now the Cleveland Guardians, right? So little by little, we're working through it in this country. One of the many things we have to work through. So welcome. We're here again this week in the end of July to talk about what's happening in education. And nationally, one of the big conversation is people are getting ready to go back to school. And again, our numbers, the COVID numbers are going up now because of the Delta variant. And although everyone is still determined to return to the classrooms, the issue is going to be about masking. And it's a national issue, and it's a state issue, it's a district issue, it's probably going to be a school issue, and probably a classroom issue in the end. But it's going to be something people are going to really have to pay attention to. There's an organization, the Burbio organization, that did a map last year of where everybody who was open and who was closed, and now that map is all about masks. Who has masks, who doesn't have masks, what states have mandated masks, and who's mandated that you can't mandate masks. It's a huge thing. There are groups that are being formed by parents. One that came to my attention is in Kern County, and it's called Kern Kids First, and it's called Let Them Breathe. Parents group called Let Them Breathe, totally about masks. And the problem is we don't know whether or not unvaccinated children can give each other or other people this new strain of the virus. That's the problem.
Now the vaccines are 12 years old and up, right? They're not giving them to kids.
Not yet.
Not yet. So that means our junior high and our high schools, they have opportunity to be vaccinated for sure.
Right.
You know, what it calls to me in terms of education is the lack of nurses and how important nurses would be. If we had a nurse at every site who could administer vaccine, who could give testing and pass out masks, and we could stay on top of this thing, especially the high schools and the middle schools where kids can get vaccinated. So just hopefully if this money that's coming about COVID, that a lot of it's going to hire, I know social emotional health is important. We also need nurses in our schools, my goodness. So
absolutely, you're absolutely right. This organization in Kern is called Kids First Kern. Let Them Breathe.
And breathe.
The question is, what are they breathing, right? And so it gets down again to how we're unable to know what these variants are doing. This particular variant is 10 times easier to catch than COVID-19 was, right? It spreads 10 times faster.
And it's like chicken pox was. Oh my goodness.
Right. So, and that means though, that if you're not vaccinated, we're all hearing the people where the pandemic is spreading is among the unvaccinated. Yeah. And the unvaccinated are folks that don't, at the core, are folks that really don't believe it's gonna make a difference, or they believe people are lying to them about the vaccine.
Yeah.
And that's really unfortunate. That's because they're not. Otherwise, you would have a different set of facts, but people aren't agreeing on the facts. And so this has become a major part of education right now. And we're gonna be hearing from our teachers unions. We're gonna be hearing from our school leaders over and over again, because there isn't any way that this is gonna get easily resolved in the next few weeks, I don't think.
No.
And, yeah,
gonna be
it's and the president is involved, the governor is involved, all of the school districts are going to be involved. So we'll be talking about masks here every week. I should bring the mask picture from the pandemic back, because
Oh, yeah.
remember, they wore masks.
Yep.
But I think I'm not sure that they had the same idea of the variants coming back, because they didn't have the same ability to travel and it sort of swept through, and then it swept through because it wasn't able to come back as quickly as this variant is. Anyway, so there's that. And schools are starting to reopen all over the country. Some schools, my son in New Orleans, he goes back to school on Monday.
Wow, so soon.
Right. School doesn't open, but they open a week later, but he goes back for professional development because they get out in May. It's just,
yeah, that's true.
it's, they just run, it's in the South, and they're different, but however, they are at epicenter right now, a real hotbed for the spread of of the new variant. So, there was all of that going on. The updates, I wanted to give a couple of updates on things I talked about last week for the two school boards. The Orange County School Board did have their meeting around ethnic studies and critical race theory, which have become, unfortunately, very intermingled in an incredibly confusing way. The school board is going to have two different meetings. They had the first one. Somebody had pulled out of it because she felt that it was slanted in a certain direction, and really it was a direction equating critical race theory to ethnic studies, which it is not, right? Critical race theory is the explanation of the fact that the American legal system has an underpinning of being racist. There are many, many racist laws in the American legal system, and that's what the critical race theory addressed. Ethnic studies addresses ethnic studies, the story of all of the communities who are part of our country. And the bigger picture is all of this is to move us from just having a white perspective to having a multicultural perspective for our country. They're struggling with that in Orange County. They're going to have another meeting. There was another dueling meeting that was held at the same time. And what we can do is look to Orange County maybe as the one of the canaries in the mine here about just bringing all of the issues around critical race theory up and understanding how much of a part it's going to play in education politics in the future.
Yeah, and I think, we'll continue looking at is what is systemic discrimination, racism, how it gets institutionalized. If something like this were to get institutionalized, that would make it systemic discrimination, because it's a catch-all. Oh, you can't teach that. It says in the, in the law, you can't. And so you could discriminate against mostly people, people of color, ethnic studies, all of that. And it would be law, it would be legal to do that. So that it's like creating systemic discrimination if these things go through. So, but you're right, it's based on a lie. It's based on a lie. Critical race theory is not all that, what they paint it to be. So.
No, and the truth is, critical race theory, which explains the fact that there were laws put in place to discriminate by race, is a fact.
It's a fact.
It's a fact. It's not like that we're making that up. that happened. The place that you look at those laws is when you're in law school looking at the specifics around those laws, but you also can look at them in the context of American history and the whole Jim Crow world that was a part of American history. So, I mean, in some ways, the good news is that we are talking about it. This is not an easy conversation for anybody, for all of these folks, and we have to come out the other side where we are able to say that in the future, our children will be taught what has really happened and how they can move forward into create a society that's able to understand this past.
Yeah, yeah. To know the truth about the past and the truth about history. That's, that's what we're looking for. So that it is going to be an ongoing conversation for sure.
Absolutely is. And it's going to be elevated to become a wedge issue in all elections in the future, because people are so energized by it, because it's been twisted into negative political messaging. And that's the thing we all have to pay attention to and just understand. We have to learn from it. Right. And I mean, schools are also being used in the recall election, which is now we're going to get our ballots in a few weeks. And the recall election is on September 14th in California. And there is, from what I can see, one person who's really who's running on the 45, one of the slate of 45 people who are running to replace Governor Newsom if he is in fact recalled. And one of them is running on an education platform, and that platform is vouchers, right? So what will that do? That will continue the privatization of our education system, right? And they're using it under the school choice umbrella, that vouchers are a choice. And what vouchers will do is allow public money to go to private schools. That's what it does. And what that ultimately does is continue to privatize and defund the district schools, the public schools that our children are in. And it will absolutely determine that they will be able to offer less to the children that they serve.
Yeah, that's true. Who are mostly children of color, children of poverty. Those are the children who will get less.
Yeah.
And, most of the people using these vouchers, are not. They have more resources, and so it's getting from people that need it and giving it to people who are less needy. So we got to watch that one too, on vouchers, the voucher system.
It's coming up. It's coming up to be part of it will be part, to the extent that a candidate can bring it forward. It certainly is going to be part of the election in the next few weeks. We should be hearing a lot about it. And so tell us, you had an important meeting this week at the county.
Yes, we had a training on aligning some school district boundaries, specifically Antioch, Brentwood, and Liberty. And this petition was submitted by them, plus it's about housing development that's going to go up, and that the boundaries goes right down the middle. And of course you can't split a house. And so you've got to change these boundaries so they fit, around a development or schools, streets. So this is something that each of those three boards have, they've looked at it, they signed it, they've approved it, and I'm sure done their own public comments with it and interactions. So that's going forward. It's a very interesting process. I think everybody, should watch. But one of the things I always felt when we talk about systemic racism in education, one of the first things that comes to mind to me are school boundaries and how that happens and what's the criteria and all of that. So this has been perfect for me to study that process. And it looks very inclusive. People want to follow the ed code. People want to, do the be on the up and up. The developers are doing what they do. They're developing houses, and actually there's such a movement from West County to East County. So, it's just kind of a natural thing that's happening. So when we go through this and then we say, well, we got to follow, the guidelines, the policies, the ed code, etc. Well, something that came up in this discussion was about counting the number of inhabitants that were living in these particular little neighborhoods. And the definition of an inhabitant was a registered voter. And I immediately was shocked that a household can be counted as inhabited. So an uninhabited household or area, has less, you don't have to be concerned about it. Oh, it's uninhabited, so we'll put it wherever we want. If it's inhabited, those individuals are then asked, they participate, they get input, you get input from them. But the others, you don't have to worry about because it's uninhabited. Just because they're not registered voters, registered to vote. And it just struck me that this, my censor of social justice said, wait a minute, this doesn't sound right. This is systemically discriminating against people that cannot, for whatever reason, are not registered. So it just brought up a lot of things for me. And it's actually Ed Code 35700. And what it also brings up is where we talk a lot of times about equity audits. There are equity audits going on in the district and all kinds. And I think that's the perfect thing for us to do, is to do an equity audit of our Ed Code. And I think the organization that would be perfect for that would be CSBA, the California School Board Association, or even the ACLU, or any kind of civil rights organization, to look at this is where systemic racism lives, in these laws, guidelines, and these codes. So that's what it brought up for me. Everybody is doing what they're supposed to do. I'm not, putting down anybody in their role in this process. I'm looking at the Ed Code with an equity lens, and this is something that needs to be changed.
It deserves a rewrite, right? We're at a point in history where we are looking at things with an equity lens, and that certainly wasn't the case when the Ed Code was drafted, right? And so it needs, I think, it needs people to go through it with that lens and understand, why do we decide this versus deciding that, and now and what's the impact? What is the impact, the equity impact of using that term and making that decision? And that's just one of thousands of decisions that the Ed Code is oversees.
Yeah.
And apparently, and the truth is, yes, it is a big deal to go through the Ed Code, but it's well worth it, right? Because otherwise you're operating under something that is oppressive. And once you realize there are equity issues all the way through it, then it's up to you to fix that. And so I think that what we need to just bring it to people's attention. That's the first thing. The first thing is for it to come to everyone's attention.
Yes.
And then see what makes sense for the next steps in terms of how it certainly can be done. The Ed Code there was a time when it didn't exist. It grew in response to education needs from the children of California. This is a need. The need is, we need to make sure that there is equity in that Ed Code, and it needs to be revised.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. We're talking about what impact does it have? What are the consequences of it? I'm thinking of a mother who has 4 kids. She's living in one of these houses. She's working 2 jobs. Maybe she didn't register to vote, and her kids don't vote. That's 5 human beings that you're going to say they don't exist because they're not registered to vote. So that's uninhabited. Maybe they don't count children, I know. But so anyway, those kind of situations, I just see some people be disenfranchised
Yeah.
for their input. So
Yeah, and so we need to have that conversation. We need to understand where we're doing that still right now today.
yeah,
Right. And who are the winners and losers in that?
yeah,
Right.
happens. Great. That's good.
So we're going to talk about that more here, and we're going to, for anybody who's watching this, contact us if you're interested in helping, and or if you have suggestions on things that we, on directions we can go with that, or maybe somebody who's already started the work that we're not aware of, which
Yeah.
is also quite possible. So it
Oh.
may well be that there are organizations that are looking at it that we don't know about, and that we would love to hear about and to help in any way we can.
Absolutely. Good point. Good point.
So I think now we're at the point I'm going to do 2 shout outs this week. The first one is for something that somebody didn't do. This is a shout out for of omission, but he omitted it very deliberately. And this is to President Biden. President Biden this year, for the first time in 30 years, chose not to sign the declaration for National Charter School Week. And that's because President Biden recognizes that charter schools have grown into something that needs to be managed in a different way, and not necessarily celebrated for the outcomes that they've had with respect to district schools. Right. And so the week happened in May. So we're late in doing this, but nonetheless, he was the first president ever to choose not to celebrate, not to sign the declaration, the proclamation. So there's that. And we want to thank Dr. Biden for
I know.
supporting that.
Yeah, she brings that to his attention.
Brings
So
a lens. It's a different lens, right?
That lens, that's right.
And he recognizes, and we must say that also right now in the federal budget, there have been efforts to cut back on money that's given to for-profit charter school operators. And this has been mischaracterized as for-profit vendors. It's not for-profit vendors. The vendors are, if you buy food from a for-profit organization, they're not saying that's what money they're cutting off. They're cutting off operators and managers, management companies.
Yep.
And those are the people who take the money off the top, cream
Yes.
off the top. And depending on which state, I mean, this is federal, so states operate differently, but these organizations in California, which we're familiar with, can take up to 17% off the top and just give it to the management company.
And some of those
Right.
salaries can get to $500,000.
Yeah, the highest paid education employee in the state of California is the head of one of those organizations, Miss Tavener, and she makes $500,000 to oversee 12 schools.
Yeah.
And she can. It's not illegal, right?
Yeah.
But if that wasn't there, if that money wasn't coming in from the federal government to support that, it would be a different story. So right now, that's in that's the appropriations bill from the House, what is in the Senate, and but it has been included in the House bill. So we will see where it goes from there.
Great.
So that's our federal shout out to all of them. And then I just want to give a shout out to Team USA and the support of the gymnastics team this week. This is Olympic week, and this is the week that Simone Biles has been supported in her decisions to take care of herself. And she made a really smart decision. She's in a really dangerous sport, and unless you're really ready to get out there and do something that 99.9% of us would never be able to do, you don't do it unless you're ready.
Yeah.
And her teammates supported her in her decision.
Yeah.
And then one of her teammates wound up, in fact, winning the gold. Right?
Yeah.
This Monk from Minnesota. So a shout out to all of our Team USA members
Yeah.
for their support.
Because it's not just a physical sport, it's also mental. And she was smart enough to recognize, where she needed some help and to ask for help. That's what people are trying to, it's okay to ask for help. And to
It
say,
was so courageous of her. And I thought the interesting thing was that Michael Phelps, person who's got
oh,
more gold medals than anybody else, is the first one who said, of
yes,
course, this has
that's
been,
right.
because there's such a weight of pressure when you're that point person.
Yeah. So
But
good
he
for
had-
them. Good for them.
Absolutely. Good for them. And this brings us back, all of us, as we move into the education world, mental health is incredibly important, right? We have to take care of that and not be dismissive about it, not be dismissive.
Yeah, for sure.
So we're going to take a break next week, right? Look for us in 2 weeks. We're going on our mental health break for a week.
Yes.
We'll see what goes on in education for the next couple of weeks, but we will join you back here in 2 weeks Between Two Teachers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.